and 1.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new Gamemaster Month advice stream. I'm Sean Reynolds of Monte Games. New GMs Month is our month-long series of blog posts, activities, and a community area to take you from cracking open your first RPG core book, whether that's Numenera, Unknown Armies, Trail of Cthulhu, or something else, to running your first session. If you want to join in on the fun, you can follow us on Twitter and join the Facebook group. I am here with our panelists, Kat Tobin of Pelgrane Press.
Hey.
Cam Banks of Atlas Games.
Hey.
Charles Ryan of Monte Games.
Hello, everybody.
And our Twitch host who's with us in chat, Matt Colville. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks to Darcy, Ross, and Matt for setting this up. Anybody have a quick introduction you want to give about yourself before we get to GMing questions?
That sounds like a good idea. Why don't everybody do a quick introduction?
How about you go first, Kat?
Okay, so my name's Kat Tobin, and I'm the co-owner and managing director of Pelgrane Press. And we produce games like Trail of Cthulhu, which is one of the games that we're showcasing in New GM Month, as well as 13th Age, Knights of Black Agents, and #Feminism.
Cam.
Yeah, hi. I'm Cam Banks, and I work for Atlas Games. I'm the RPG director, and the games we make that you might be interested in include Unknown Armies, which is the one that we have currently got some great blog posts about. And we also publish Feng Shui 2. We have a new game coming out soon, which is a new edition of Over the Edge. And we are also known for Ars Magica, of which there are many, many, many books.
Very cool. And Charles.
Yep. So I'm Charles Ryan. I'm the COO at Monte Games. I began GMing after I got the D&D basic set for Christmas of 1979. So that means I've been GMing for almost 40 years. And I've been in the game business for quite some time. And here at MCG, we began New Gamemaster Month. I think this is our 4th year, but it was an MCG only enterprise for the first few years. And so I'm the guy that has put together the curriculum for New Gamemaster Month. And then this year, I was fortunate enough to rope Kat and Cam, Atlas, and Pelgrane into joining forces with us and broadening the scope of it and bringing in more new GMs.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for being here. So first question is just a warm up. Oh, yes, Charles.
I don't think we need to introduce Matt on his own stream, but I just wanted to thank Matt for hosting us on this. And Matt and I go way back. We used to work together at Last Unicorn Games. And Matt, I presume you're listening. Here's something that's kind of interesting. Today's normally my GMing night, and I run a survival horror campaign, and Christian is in that campaign. But we had to cancel tonight, and this is running a little bit earlier. But if the timing had been a little different, as it looked like it might have been earlier this week, you would have been able to say hi to Christian here live and on video. Just throwing that in there.
All right. So quick warm-up topic is, why do you enjoy GMing? Because everybody was new to GMing at one point, and I would like to hear our panel of experts just talk very briefly about why GMing is something that you enjoy. And I'd like to start with Kat, please.
So I think that for me, one of the reasons why I really, really love GMing is the moment of realization when you're running an investigative type game, as I tend to do quite often. And you just see that dawning moment of realization in the player's eyes as they're like, oh, and suddenly it all comes together for them. And all of the little things that you've seeded all the way through the adventure suddenly all comes together in this one perfect, exciting, now we know what we're going to do. Let's get into it. Let's finish this kind of moment. And I love that kind of the realization and the sense of achievement that you feel from your players when they crack that mystery and when they understand what's going on. I really love kind of creating that situation for people.
Very nice. What about you, Cam?
I like putting on funny accents because I have one myself. One of my greatest joys about GMing is that that when your storytelling always talks about a beginning, a middle, and an end. I do the beginning really well, and I don't know how to do anything in the middle, and players are really good at doing that. So, and then the ending, I can kind of make sense of it once we figure out what happened during the game. So GMing is wonderful for throwing situations out there to see if people will do something interesting with them, and you have no idea half the time what they're going to do. And that sense of sort of exploring the imaginations of other people at the table is what I really get a kick out of. I don't want necessarily to tell my story. I'd rather they tell a story. That's one of the big things about GMing that I really like.
Very cool. And Charles?
Well, going last, the other two have stolen the good stuff there. I'm totally with Kat. I've always referred to that as the reveal, that moment where something you set up early in an adventure, or sometimes like months ago in a campaign, and the players have that moment where they're like, oh my God, it's that guy, or oh my God, that's the thing. That is super, super satisfying. And I also completely agree with Cam that bringing a story to the table, and you bring it as the creator as sort of an outline almost, and you don't really know how it's going to play out. And then the players are making decisions that are maybe not what you would have foreseen or what you would have chosen. And then you run with that, and then it kind of curves back around to where you kind of had in mind and stuff. And it's really neat to see it unfold in a way that you couldn't have done if you're a novelist, right? Or I mean, as a novelist, you have sole control over that. As a GM, you get to sort of lay things out and then be a participant. It's like creating and consuming at the same time in terms of what's being created, and that's also a huge amount of fun. I started, like I said, I started in 1979 with the D&D basic set, and my very first purchase was the DMG, the first, like from the hardcover first edition books. The DMG was the first one I purchased. So I guess there was just some urge to get stories out there that I had from the very beginning. That I must be scratching that itch through jamming.
All right. So we have another introductory topic, and this time I want to put Cam on the spot first.
Oh no.
Can you give us a piece of advice or insight that helped you when you were just starting out as a GM?
Okay. It was very helpful when I was starting out that the basic set, it was the Frank Mensa Red Box that everyone talks about all the time, had a lot of really good introductory materials included in it, and it sort of had like a solo part that you can play through yourself, and then it had instructions for how to. It was very much set, though. It didn't have a lot of initially you felt that you already had one way of doing it. And when I had friends who already were running games, and I was the third of my circle of three back in I guess the equivalent of middle school, they'd already run games and I was a player. And so I got to benefit from them trying it out first and then sort of following in their footsteps. But it was really the fact that the materials that I had to use to start with knew that I was starting out and weren't going to be terribly difficult, but also weren't pulling any punches. I don't think that box set really does hide the fact that the game is as complicated as it was at the time. So,
what about you, Kat? I mean, obviously Cam started with D&D, but I don't know what game you started with and what you found to be especially useful when you were first becoming a GM.
So this is kind of, I guess, not embarrassing, but the very first game I ever ran was Macho Women with Guns. So I've always had a soft spot for the kind of the comedic games. And something that I really wish I had known was that when I first started writing my own adventures, I really worried about the players being cleverer than me. And so I would write up so much backstory. Like for a Macho Women with Guns, it's, comedic one-shot game. And I would write up a ton of backstory. There would be so many NPCs. They all had these really complicated motivations, and they were all trying to achieve different things all at the same time. And I somehow thought that all of that would come through in the game, and it never really did. So I think that my concern that my adventures would come across as being too linear meant that I wrote up too much as a GM. And I think that learning what is foregrounded and what is backgrounded, what will come through in the game and what won't come through in the game, and what you need to do around the game. And also that actually the players need a lot less than you might think. Adventures are always linear in retrospect, and you don't always have to have a big complicated backstory around everything, because actually when you look back at it, they will have only followed one path through. So it's not necessary to write up complicated backstories of multiple pages for every NPC they might encounter. I think that was one of the things I really wish I had known before I started. Or,
Those are all
you know.
good points.
Mhm.
Charles, anything to add?
I would just throw in that last piece, or that piece of classic advice, which is very common in GM advice, where you find GM advice these days, which is to use that improv prompt of yes, but, rather than no, when the players come up with a suggestion, because it totally plays into what Cam was saying earlier about, the players taking things in a different direction. It can be really, really tempting to have a vision and say, when the players say, well, I go over here, or could I go this place, or could I do this thing, to say, oh, no, it's not like that. I've already thought out how this looks, and it looks exactly like this. But instead to be flexible and say, yes, you can go over there, and you find blah, blah, blah. Or yes, but it's not quite what you expect, it's this. And so that flexibility makes the game more engaging and fun for you, certainly more engaging and fun for the players. And it sounds like easy advice. It actually can be a bit it can be bit difficult to kind of figure out how to walk the line and make that work effectively, and not have the game just degrade into anything goes. But it makes it fun.
Great. So we have a question from the chat from 3x3. As a writer, do you write dialogue before you say it at the table? Anyone?
I have never done that. I think it's an interesting idea. I've made up names for characters before, and certain call signs or other things that maybe they're known for, like a catchphrase. But I think on my feet all the time, and so the improv side of it is super huge for me. Like off what they do, the dialogue never ends up being something I prepare in advance.
What about you, Kat?
I also tend not to do that. What I'll usually have is a list of names, because I find it hard to think of names on the fly. So I'll have kind of a list of names that I'll have made in advance, and then I'll usually have a kind of a character concept in my head. So I'll maybe have like a famous film star or TV star, and I'll go, they're kind of like that. So then when they encounter the NPC, I can just snap straight into it and just improv, because I know in my head how they'll react to things. I can just improvise all of the dialogue.
I often base just kind of one-off NPCs off people I knew in real life that nobody at the table knows, but it's like, oh yeah, I went to college with this person and this is how they act, and I can just immediately do that. Yeah. What about you, Charles?
So I would take it a step further. I would say that not only do I not write dialogue ahead of time, but I also won't write descriptions. Like some adventures, published adventures, will have box text that describe the room or describe the scene or whatnot, and I won't do that. What I will do is I'll write a handful of bullet points of the most important things based on the impression. So rather than saying, you walk into a room, it's 50 feet by 60 feet, and the ceiling is 20 feet high, and there's a large fireplace on the other side, instead I might write just a bullet point. Really big room, hot because of a blazing fire, and things. Because what happens is then, as the GM, instead of reading a piece of paper to the players, which is always boring, it was boring when you did it in biology class, and it's boring at the game table. Instead, I'm referring to a note, but I'm actually describing extemporaneously. So I'm giving the place color and volume and describing the way it feels and seems. The whole scene, I'm just working from some notes, rather than having a complete description that kind of just feels boring to receive. And it also tends to assume a specific thing. That piece of box text was written as though people came in through the east door. What if they came in through the west door, right? Then you've got to modify the box text anyway. So if you just got some notes, A, it's quicker to prepare. B, you're more spontaneous at the table. And C, it's reactive to the situation, which will never be exactly what you or the adventure writer imagined it would be before putting it all together.
Certainly the energy of having the thought and you want to express it to the players is very different from expressing that very same thought by reading a speech that you already had.
Exactly.
So like, just even if it's your own words, the tone of saying, I am going to read this thing and it has a certain cadence to it, versus, okay, then this thing happens. So I 100% agree with you there.
Yep, and writing 4 or 5 bullet points is so much faster than easier than writing out all that dialogue anyway, right? So it cuts down your prep time.
Yeah. Now that's very much a D&D-ism, just because since the dawn of time, D&D adventures have had, all this box text for you to read. Sometimes even, a half a page of box text for some gigantic boss encounter. We have a question from Twitter. If I've only played D&D, how hard will it be to learn a new game system? Like, other than the genre, do the different games lend themselves to a different experience? And so it's kind of two questions, but if you want to tackle either one of those, let's start with Kat.
So I think that if you're learning a new game system, one of the ways to make it, I don't think it's difficult. Particularly if you know D&D, I think that's one of the more complex game systems out there at the moment. So I think that a lot of games outside of that will be much more accessible to you. But I think that a good kind of rule of thumb for choosing a new game is to look at what you enjoy in the games that you're currently playing. So if, for example, if you really like D&D and it's the rules, it's the D20 system that appeals to you, then you can look at maybe doing a D20 Cthulhu game or a D20 modern day game, or you can use the same rule system but just get a different setting. Or if it's the fantasy flavor that appeals to you, then you can look at maybe learning new game systems in different fantasy settings. So that way you're not throwing yourself in having to learn a new setting and a new system at the same time. You're still kind of taking a kind of a half step towards something that you already know. Just in terms of what was the other half of the question was how different mechanics create a different play experience. And I just wanted to touch on that as well, because I think that for us as a company, 2 of our games are really good highlights of that. So we have the Gumshoe system, which powers all of our investigative games, and that's designed to enable you to solve a mystery. But then we also have the drama system, which powers Hillfolk, and that's designed for a completely different play experience. So whereas with Gumshoe, it's more procedural, you're collecting clues and then you're using those clues to solve a mystery. With the drama system, it's literally the rules are designed to create a dialogue between all of the players. So it's designed for inter-character drama. So choosing the system and looking at what that system does is really important, because it does definitely generate different play experiences at the table.
Cool. Charles, Cam, anything to add?
I would certainly add that by and large, most of the key skills are completely transferable between games. Obviously, it can vary a little bit, but Kat talked about when she first GM'd, she was worried about the players being more clever than her, knowing more about the material than her, and she wanted to get ahead of that by really delving into the details. And I think that's a really common fear of new GMs. They're worried about the rule system. They also worry about if they're using a published setting like Numenera, that somebody at the table knows more about that setting and that they'll get something wrong, and that's a worry. But honestly, I think that I'd put that worry out of your head, right? First of all, most players I think are very forgiving and willing to be helpful, particularly when you're talking about a game system. And then secondly, the game is your own, rules-wise and setting-wise, as a GM, to do what you want with it. So I think that if you are an experienced D&D DM and you're thinking about GMing in other game systems, 90% of what you know will be completely transferable, and the other 10%, don't fret it. Don't be afraid because of that. It'll be easy to bring it on board.
I would say that there are some games, and actually quite a lot of games, where the basic mechanic of the system and things like how to make characters and just the basics of combat seem to be pretty easy to pick up. It's sort of the various other expanded versions of those within the game that might take a little time to get used to. And you can do those things one session at a time. If you want to introduce vehicle combat, do that a different session from the one when you make characters or the one where you start using combat for the first time. I really do think that the system that you use does inform and change a lot of the experience. Like Feng Shui 2 is supposed to be a very high action Hong Kong cinema game, whereas Unknown Armies isn't anything like that. But I agree what you said, Charles, too, that the fact that once you've played one game, you can kind of get an idea of how that sort of dynamic at the table is supposed to work. I'm the one who sits here, rolls some dice, I've got some notes, you have your characters, and there are some games that mess with that kind of dynamic a bit, but not a lot of them. And you aren't going to go too far wrong if you continue to have the same kind of group feel that you had with each game you play. And that's at least reassuring. If Joe over there is going to play kind of a sneaky rogue character, he's always going to play a sneaky rogue character no matter which game you play. And, Mary decides that she always wants to have 7 ring binders full of backstory, and she'll do that no matter what. That kind of thing where your actual table, the people who are playing with, will be the same from game to game is really kind of neat. So I like that you can at least count on some things as a social side of the game to stay the way they are.
Cool. We have a question from John Matt 3000. So what is the thing that you think most often keeps people from GMing? What would you say to get them off the fence about that hesitation? And I'd like to start with Charles this time.
I think it's kind of what I just said a couple minutes ago. I think a lot of people that are interested in it, they think that there's some secret sauce that they don't have, or that they're insecure that you know, somebody else will know it better or do it better, and that they will look bad. And I would just say there isn't a secret sauce. It's just doing it, and having fun. There's not some special skill out there or talent that you lack that other people have. Do it, and your players will love it. And if they don't, great, then do something else. But it's not as hard as you think it is. It's not as scary as you think it is. And you don't have to have some special skills that you don't have currently. Yeah, that's it.
Kat?
I think I definitely agree with Charles. I think that kind of fear of getting it wrong and fear of not knowing the system, or that somebody else will know the system better than you, is a really big issue for people. And I think as well, it's interesting with the rise of role-playing games on things like Twitch and YouTube, where now I think a lot of people are watching more experienced GMs run games, and so there's an expectation that their game should be like that. Whereas, you know, there's no kind of realization or understanding that these people like Matt and like Charles have been running games for a long time and a lot of years. And when you run your first game, it's not going to look the way you've seen it on the internet. You know, it's going to be a little bit rougher, and that's okay. You know, it's, as Charles said, your players will be very, very forgiving, and you know, it's just, you just need to get over that fear that you're not going to do it as well as other people.
Yeah.
Everyone is you know, rusty the first time.
Well, it's like Jake from Adventure Time says, you know, sucking at something is the first step to becoming awesome at something. And if you
That's true.
Yeah.
If you don't take that first step as a GM and make those mistakes, like I'm going to throw out, when I was in high school, I ran a D&D game for my friends, and it went off the rails, and sometimes it got boring, and I, you know, wasn't very creative with naming characters. A lot of character NPCs ended up getting named for different types of candy, and people just jokingly called my campaign Candyland, and then did that for a few months and said, okay, now that I've learned some things not to do, now we can start over and have a more like different experience that isn't involving, you know, the arch wizard Skittle being, you know, sending you out on missions for things.
Darcy, who's running things behind the scenes here for us tonight, wrote an article that was posted on the MCG website just a few days ago, and she talked about how in her first GMing experience, you know, she thought it was horrible, but all of her friends loved it, right? And I've also seen that happen when people have played, they've been like, oh God, what a disaster. And I'm like, what? I didn't think that was a disaster. I had a great time. And then it turns out all the other players did too.
Yeah.
The first time...
Sorry, go ahead, Cam.
I was going to say, the first time that I ran a game with any kind of sense of confidence, I accidentally ended up killing all the player characters off, and I felt terrible. And these days, people talk about the TPK, or total party kill, and making it sort of a pride of place or something, but I felt absolutely awful. And it wasn't until I talked about this with the players afterwards, they said, oh, that's fine. That's no big deal. We'll make better characters next time. I said, no, I'll make a better adventure next time. And so we had this kind of agreement that maybe we'll just try over. But it's interesting how that's the fear that I had, was like, what if I don't do this in a way that the players will die, and that will be a failure, and that's my fault. And I think a lot of these things that we're talking about are the same kind of things you experience in any social group when trying something different for the first time, whether you're put in a sense of some sort of responsibility or some sort of, you know, ownership over the process. Everyone looks to you and they kind of say, well, okay, so you'll move now, Cam. And I'm like, oh. And I think it's, once you've done it a few times with any kind of group setting, you'll get the hang of it too. And gaming is the same thing.
That's a great point.
Yeah, a lot of it is getting to kind of understand how your particular group's dynamic is, and if you're lucky, then you're gaming with your friends, and you kind of know everybody's personalities. And this person plays a sneaky character, and this person plays the person with all the backstory, and so you can find different bits that appeal to different players, which is really cool. Some of it is trying to understand how to properly pace the story. Like when things are going too fast, you want to settle it down. When things are going a little slow, you want to speed it up. What sort of GMing advice do you have about managing time and handling the improv aspect, which, because you have on one end, you have improv, and then you have like planning everything out, and you want to find a nice middle ground for your campaign and for your players. So Cam, what do you think about some advice for handling pacing?
I always have looked at games as kind of a cinematic thing, and by that I mean I think of it in terms of a thing that I would watch as a movie or a TV show, in terms of cutting scenes between each other. I don't always feel you have to end a scene and finish it with everyone having done everything they need to do or want to do. You can say, okay, well, now that this thing's happened, we'll cut to 6 hours later when this is going on. And I feel in some sense that one of the major tools that a game master has on their hand is being able to control when scenes start and finish and who's in them. And that has been a common thing for me, is at least in trying to explain game mastering and games I've worked on, is you get to put people where they are, and you get to sort of set it up. You can start it halfway through the middle of a fight if you want to start things in medias res, as they call it. What were you doing 5 minutes ago? To one of the players, and they go, I don't know, how did we get there? You tell me, how'd you get here? That kind of thing is great, and you can control pacing by just sort of like skipping over the boring parts and getting to something that you think might be a good set piece for the next 20, 30 minutes of play.
Yeah, I think it's a great advice. Like, one of the things that took me decades of GMing to realize is that you can cut off a fight. You can cut off a combat scene. When it gets to the boring part and all you're doing is whittling down those last few hit points or whatever, you can say, okay, and then you mop up rather than go through another 4 rounds of combat of mopping up.
And related to that is the idea that sometimes you want, like a television show, you want to end an episode on a cliffhanger. And so your ending thing might be like, and the doors burst open and a bunch of monsters run in and we're stopping here for the night. And everyone's just like, oh, and they want more and they want to come back to your game for the next session.
True enough, yeah.
Something that I find super useful for in terms of pacing, particularly when I'm doing one-shots or convention games and there's a set time period. I have to admit I'm not great with pacing in longer games and campaign games, because I really love hearing that kind of cross-table chat between the players when they're playing in character. So I tend to kind of just sit back and watch that and let that go. But for convention games where you do have to have a very strict you have a time slot that you have to run that game in. Something that I find super useful is what we call a scene flow diagram. So Trail of Cthulhu is broken, a published Trail of Cthulhu adventure is broken down into scenes, and you have what's called a scene flow diagram that shows you how each of the scenes connects into the other ones, but it also tells you what scenes lead into which scenes and what scenes lead out of what scenes, and which scenes are what we call core scenes. So you know that if you're running short on time, you can just bypass some of what we call alternate scenes, which are ones that just provide information in a different way, and just run straight through. You can tell at any point in the adventure how far away you are from the end. And I find that really helps me in terms of like diverting people into alternate scenes if I'm running short on time. So if I'm looking like I'm going to finish too early, I'll make sure that we head up some of those extra alternate scenes. Whereas if we're running short on time, I'll just carve a line straight down the middle through all the core scenes, picking them all up on the way. And I find having that visualization of where you are in the adventure, it has been really, really helpful for me.
One thing in 3rd edition D&D, we talked a bit about how a dungeon is really easy to be a game master for, because a dungeon is basically a flow chart for an adventure. You can go straight, you can go left, you can go right. But if you can abstract that to any sort of campaign narrative or adventure, you have the same sort of setup. Like, oh, the players could go here, they could go there. If they go here, then they have A and B choices. There are places for them to cross back and forth. And again, like you said, if you're running out of time, sometimes you can just skip past something that isn't really super relevant. But you can still save that information for later. Like, this is a neat encounter that isn't directly related to the current plot point. I'm going to save that for the next game. And so they're going to meet this weird little merchant next time. It's all about saving stuff and not letting it go to waste.
It's also like worth knowing what your players enjoy, because I've had campaigns, this is speaking as a player actually rather than a GM, but I've had campaigns where, we got to the end of a really big sequence of adventures, and the next thing was the big bad, set piece battle, and we all showed up for the session that evening and ended up spending 4 hours just planning for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But everybody had a really good time. And so if that's what the gamers like, as a GM, I don't think the GM did anything that evening, right? But except maybe answer a few questions. As a GM, if that's what your players are enjoying, let them run with it. But if it's bogging things down, then it's incumbent on you to try and, whether that's the Raymond Chandler, a guy crashes through the door with a gun and you just sort of make something action happening, or you literally just cut the players off and say, hey guys, you're out of time, or whatever. You have the ability to control pace, but outside of the convention setting, like Kat was talking about, if you're not constrained for time, let the players have that cross-table in-character chat if that's what they're enjoying, and particularly if that's what all of them are enjoying. If some of the people are bored, you want to get it moving. But yeah, let them do what they want.
That's a great point. We also a similar question. Someone wanted basic advice for table and player management, where you talk to your players about their expectations for the campaign. A lot of times, a GM will come up with an idea for a campaign and say, "This is the campaign I want to run," without thinking, but the players may not want to play that sort of campaign. And so if you have a very combat-heavy, gritty sort of game and people want something that's a bit more lighthearted, you want to negotiate with them and find something in the middle that can kind of serve so that everybody has fun. What do you do as a GM, and again, filtered through the lens of a new GM, to engage with your players to help get them on board with a shared campaign that everybody's going to enjoy? And let's go with Kat again.
I think that really sitting down with your players before you even start the game and just having a conversation between all of you about what it is you're looking for from that game is the most important thing that you can do. And then I think choosing the game that you're going to play based on everyone's expectations is I think that's a really useful way of making sure that everyone's on the same page. And there are other safety tools that you can use as well if to manage people's expectations during the game. You can maybe agree that a particular set of, if you're playing maybe a horror game or something, and it might end up getting a bit close to home, and you're concerned that people might have problems with that, you can get people to write up a list in advance of topics that they don't want to see come up in the game. And then as the GM, you can control what is coming through in that. So you can moderate basically what the play experience is like based on the players' input. But I think having the players' input is the key thing, really, to do that, and knowing what it is they're looking for from that experience is the most important way of doing it.
Charles?
So I think that I agree with everything Kat said. I think that you've got to have a passion for what you're doing, right? So if you and the players, if what you want to do isn't, if you want to do some gritty military post-apocalyptic things and you've got a bunch of players who just are not into that at all, you're going to have a hard time making that work, because if you bend too far in their direction, you may end up not running the campaign that you want to run, and it stops being fun for you. And everybody's got to have fun at the table, and that includes you, because if you don't have fun, you won't bring the passion and the energy to it and make it as much fun for them. And sooner or later, you'll burn out. And you just won't want to run it. So I think it is super important that you do something that you really, really enjoy. It's super important that you understand what your players are going to be able to get out of the game or wanted to get out of the game, so that you can shape it, as Kat was saying. What I would do is I would also engage with the players and their characters. And you might not be able to do this before the game gets started. Maybe it's something that happens after the first session or a few times after the first handful of sessions. But find out what the characters want out of life, right? Like, are they just in this to kick down doors and take the gold from monsters? Or, does this player beginning to think that maybe he wants to find out who murdered his brother or something like that? These sort of elements give you something to bake into the campaign that they will then be after, right? So if that player has made something up about their brother got killed by something mysterious and they want to track that down, then you can start weaving that into your ideas for where the adventures are going to go, and that will really hook the players in, even if you're running in a setting that wasn't their first choice.
So Cam, I have a different question for you because your company publishes Ars Magica, and one of the features of that is kind of a troop style GMing where like the role of the game master changes, not necessarily from session to session, but sometimes you have a different GM for the same group. And I was thinking that talking about that briefly might be a good way to help a new GM transition to the GM role. If you were literally like taking the same group of characters that you normally play with, and Chris says, my character is going to go off on vacation for a month and I'm going to be the GM, and the regular GM is going to roll up a character and join you, and we're going to adventure together, that might be a good way to kind of get that sense of, we know what these characters want to do, we know about the world. This doesn't have to have a really big, gigantic impact on the world story, but it's still familiar enough to everybody that I can kind of take a training wheels approach to GMing.
Yeah, I see that a little bit like how sometimes you'll have miniseries in comic books where some other writer and artist has done a short bit of some of the characters who are from the main comic series, and they've gone off and they've done sort of a 4-issue thing, which is just a different story. It's the same world. The characters may be the same. The same thing applies in this case. I think if you're all familiar enough with the setting, especially if it's a published one that everyone knows, or something like, 13th century Europe with magic, like Mythic Europe is for Ars Magica, that the important part about that is just knowing that you're not going to wreck something if you take control of it for a little while. You don't feel like, if I do this, is it going to make the whole world blow up? It's good to start off really small with that, and one way that kind of ends up being successful is if you have an idea, well, what if we go on a voyage to, Athens for my story, and then we'll come back, in 2 years, and then we'll see what has happened. And that's cool because, that's something you can sort of research yourself. You might decide, I want to do a story in Athens, which is, what's 13th century Greece like? I'll look it up. I'll do some looking, maybe there's a source book or something. But then the main GM who's normally doing it, or the other GMs who maybe have been using it before, they don't feel as if you're sort of stepping on top of their stuff, or you don't feel that you're stepping on theirs. Maybe they don't care. The troop style play is fun. In Ars Magica, everyone has a magi or a magi, a magus. The Latin often goes back and forth with me, but everyone's got this powerful wizard, right? And that's their main character. But they also have like a companion character who is someone they play when someone else is playing their wizard. Normally, all the wizards don't go off and do things by themselves as a group. Normally, one of them or two of them will go off, and then everyone else plays their companion character, who's like a knight or a artisan or a merchant or someone else who's crazy enough to go off with a wizard for an adventure. And these characters are secondary characters, but they're just as fun to play. And then one person who's the story guide or the GM of this session doesn't play their character at all, obviously, because they're playing all the incidental NPCs and so on. And that setup is interesting because, like I was saying, you could have all these different locations around the world that you tend to take a story, but when they all come back to the Covenant, which is where they all kind of hang out and do their lab work, and you've already got a character made for you that you can come back to. You've already got characters that you can feel like, it's okay if I don't play him because he's off in his lab doing some work, and I'll come back. When I'm done being the GM, I'm going to have all this rituals that I've developed in the downtime. And that kind of thing is set up well for that kind of play too. And I think it's easy to take that into other games as well.
Cool. So, Kat, earlier you were talking about how you developed all this backstory for your Macho Women with Guns game, and how like the adventure tends to become a railroad, just in retrospect, because you had one path that you chose. We have some new GMs in the audience, and they're not familiar with the terms of a sandbox campaign versus a railroad campaign. Can you just give a quick definition of that, and how you would find balance between the two ends of that spectrum?
Okay, so a sandbox campaign is where you have a lot of, let's call them different nodes, and the players can essentially go through the campaign in any order. There's no set path through it. It's more like a progression. It's like they can go to a location or to maybe a time period, and they can just explore that. So Ken Hite, who's one of our writers who wrote Trail of Cthulhu, refers to that as like an ocean of clues. So you literally drop the players into an ocean of clues, and they can swim around to wherever it is they want to wherever it is takes their fancy, and they'll kind of get to an end just over time, just by kind of accumulating clues in this ocean of clues. Whereas a railroaded adventure, or a more linear adventure, is one that tends to have fewer branching paths. So there'll generally be one route through the adventure, and it will usually, it's often used as a negative term, the term railroad, because it feels quite limited often if it's not run very well, in that you say walk into a room and there's a giant box that said open this to go on to the next location. You're like, okay, I guess I open the box then. So it tends to restrict the players, and just direct them, funnel them down one path through the adventure. So a lot of our adventures tend to be more, as I said earlier, more branchings. So you have your scene flow diagram, and there'll be an introduction or an investigative trigger that will start everything off, and then it'll expand out into a number of different branches that you can go down. So yeah, so I think that's the kind of the main difference between like the kind of the more sandboxy, open-ended campaign as well. There's no particular way. Two groups will always play a sandbox campaign differently. There's no right way to play it or wrong way to play it. It's just however you want to go with it. Whereas a more railroaded or linear adventure, pretty much every group will go and meet Mary, and Mary will give them the weird book, and then they'll take the weird book to the library, and then the librarian will say, oh, well, that's, the old church down there, and then they'll go to the old church, and then they'll, the priest will say, well, you got to dig up a grave, and then they'll dig up the grave, and then there'll be a ghoul, and then they'll kill the ghoul, and that's it. So every group will hit all of those same points in a more linear adventure.
Charles, Dan, anything you want to add to that? Or tips on where to find a balance between the two?
Yeah, I would say that I would just add that by and large, people usually use the term railroading as disparaging because it's often associated with a GM who can only envision the adventure occurring a certain way, and then kind of won't let the players diverge from the path that they have in mind. People usually use the word sandbox positively because it means an open-ended world where the players can do anything that they want. But I think balance is super, super important because it's also possible for players to get to sort of swim and have no idea what they can do next to advance the story. And I've played as a player in a couple of campaigns where the players just became very frustrated because after the third 4-hour game session on a Friday night where we hadn't advanced the story at all because we just hadn't chosen to go to places that had useful information to advancing the story, it was a very frustrating experience. So despite those sort of connotations, I think that both sort of versions are bad. You can think of sandboxing as like if you played a campaign that was a mega dungeon, right? Where like the whole map of the dungeon has been made and every single room has been filled with an encounter and the players can go to whatever order they want. But even that's a bit of a lie though, right? Because the person who designed that dungeon probably put the staircase down to level 2 way at the back of level 1 so that you will probably have to have explored all of level 1 or much of level 1 before you can get to level 2, right? So right there, that's a railroady element to even sandbox adventure design. So I would just say that as a GM, you want to look at your adventures, no matter whether it's a published adventure or one that you made up, in the sense of like you kind of have an idea, a vague outline, and probably it's vaguer the further away you are from the events of it. And then you're willing to follow that outline. You're also willing to let the players kind of guide how it unfolds. And then later on, you can, if there is some super important scene that has to happen, if they've really got to talk to that priest to find out about where to dig up that grave, typically you'll find some way to bring that back into it, right? If they never go to the church, maybe the priest is down at the pub having a pint when the players walk in there, and they can have the conversation there. But you can adjust and bring those narrative elements in it without it being railroady.
I will say that, like for Unknown Armies, for years in previous editions, one of the things that people used to ask us was, we've made characters, we know all these different kinds of strange occult groups that belong to the setting and everything else, but what do? We don't know what we do. What's the first adventure? And sometimes we'll publish the adventures and you'll say, well, that's a one-shot, now what? So for 3rd edition, something that I really liked about what Greg Stolze did, the designer, is that he introduced this idea of objectives. And it's kind of a middle between the two things. The players as a group come together and they've got this, they've made their characters together, they collaborated how to make them, they've also contributed to making the setting. If you want a specific kind of location in the setting that you want, like if it's going to be a strip mall, that's your main setting. Well, is it going to be a nails shop that, where the people do, go in there and get your manicures and so on? Is there going to be like a rent-a-video place that's still there, even though it should have been closed years ago? The players make these locations, and that gives you kind of, your sandbox in a way. You've got the different places, and someone says, well, there has to be a library. Well, there has to be this. Now that you have that stuff, you've got the sandbox, but you want to know, well, where do we go next? And as the GM, you shouldn't, I don't think, within Onami, sort of say, well, now that you've made your characters and everything is cool, I've got my story, you will play that no matter what, So instead of that, while the collaboration has been going on, you've been sort of giving suggestions. Well, maybe there is a university that's got a professor who's a drunk. And then they say, that sounds cool. We'll go with the professor who's a drunk. You're like, great, I've got the professor who's a drunk window. But the objective is the important part of this. It's like, what do you as a group want to achieve in the game? Do you want to unseat this local political character who's, you all hate? Do you want to sort of solve some strange occult mystery that no one's ever been able to solve? Do you all want to grab mystical power and ascend to the stratosphere? These things are what the objectives are about. And once you've established that, the Game Master gets this sort of, I've got locations, I've got your characters, I've got what you guys want to do in the game. I will go away and I'll plan something, and next time we'll play and we'll see how it turns out. And each session has that sandbox in a way because you haven't really got things bolted down entirely. You don't have a fixed path. But you do also have a common idea for what the characters want to do. They all want to achieve a thing. They've all got their own goals personally and also as a group. And that's really, really useful, especially in a modern day game. I think it's less important for fantasy because it tends to go more D&D style. But with a game like this, with so many things you could do and so many characters, it's great to have the players sort of decide, well, we want this game to be about this. And then once we've told you that, you can go ahead and prepare what kind of awful antagonist you want for us.
So we have a couple of questions that are similar and kind of spinning off of this from Ozaratai and from Jupiterelli, which their questions basically are, if you're trying to have sandbox elements, to some extent, you have to be able to have anything happen in the campaign. Like you have these things, how do you make time to plan for that? How do you plan for that? And do I have to keep exactly what the main bad guy is doing on a day-to-day basis in my mind while you're doing that? And I think what most new GMs need to understand is the GM is controlling the flow of time in kind of response to what the players are doing. And it's okay for the GM to go, I'm going to go to the kitchen and get another soda, or I'm going to take a bathroom break, because what you really need is, I need 5 minutes to think about what this person is doing right now. You control that aspect of the time. And if you can pass off some of that time to the next game session, that gives you an extra week to come up with something that isn't like by the seat of your pants. But you have so much information in your head from movies and TVs and plays and things like that, that you can just pick up some plot element from, like, if your players stumble into something that you didn't expect them to, there could be something based on some weird little Outer Limits episode. You're like, oh, this would be a little one-off within the regular campaign. They say Joseph Campbell has the idea of the hero's journey, where the hero goes on a journey and learns more about himself and acquires a mentor and overcomes some obstacle and then comes home again. And it's just another way of saying that all stories kind of tend to have this particular pattern. And it's often hero goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town. And both of those basically are the same story from a different perspective. And if you just kind of flip an existing story and put it in a different genre, you can really come up with something unique and different that players aren't expecting. Just as an example, I know I'm the moderator, I'm talking too much, but my brother-in-law, J.D. Weicker, ran a Feng Shui game. One second. Sorry, I had a maintenance person show up and just walk into my apartment. Anyway, so he was running a Feng Shui game set in Tijuana, and the PCs are in a bar, and the ghost of the town sheriff appears in the bar, points at his son, says something cryptic, and then vanishes. And they end up having this like big old session about like, oh, it turns out that the sheriff was murdered, and some people think that the sheriff's brother was involved, and the son is conflicted, and all this stuff happens. And they run through this entire campaign that was just kind of a one-off idea. They finish the campaign, and JD says, and that is the story of Hamlet. So feel free to grab stories from anywhere and cram them into your game, even if it's just, file off the serial number so it's not obvious that this is Captain Kirk analog and this is the Spock analog. Just put it into your game, roll with it. These are your friends, you're going to have fun. It's an enjoyable shared experience. We have 10 minutes left. I want to wrap up really quick and maybe get one or two quick questions in here. Here's a good one. I'm going to take the positive aspect. What do you love the most about your favorite RPG? And why does that make you excited to GM that game? And let's go with Kat first.
I think that, so the game that I tend to run the most often when I run games at the moment, the game that I tend to run the most often is Hillfolk. And I usually play in one of so Hillfolk, the standard setting is you're playing 10th century hill tribes in the Levant. And I tend to run in one of the alternate settings. There's about 60 of them across the core book and the supplement. And I really enjoy running Hillfolk in the different settings because for me, one of the things that I love the most about role-playing is telling the character stories. Like it's nice to have a big plot, and I love a good mystery as well, but I really love the kind of the developing relationships between the characters and the evolution of those, the creation of friendships and the building of trust between the characters, and when things go wrong between the characters, what the fallout of that and the consequences of that. I love watching the relationships between the characters change and evolve and improve and get worse and that kind of thing. So for me, running a Hillfolk is a real, I am very much a kind of a sitting back and watching the players. It's like a form of entertainment. I think Charles touched on it earlier when he said, like, as a GM, you're also a consumer of this kind of shared collaborative storytelling. And with the drama system in particular, the players put a lot of their own ideas and their own material into it, which is something that I really love. So that's it tends to be my default game to run now, because you never know how a drama system game is gonna end up. You just don't know where it's gonna go when you start it. You throw a ball into the players and they just pass it around themselves, and it's just gorgeous to watch.
Cool. Cam.
My favorite RPG of all time is King Arthur Pendragon, Greg Stafford's game about Arthur's knights and everybody who's associated with them. I think that what I like most about this is that the game is played out over generations. It begins in the time of Uther, before Arthur is even born, and it ends when he and Mordred are facing each other at the Battle of Camlann, and you play sometimes the grandson or granddaughter of your original knight at the end of this campaign. And it is a long campaign. I mean, the book, it's called The Great Pendragon Campaign, where he's sort of laid out the entire story, is huge. And I have never actually done the entire thing. And what tends to happen is I start the game out in the kind of, quote, post-Romanized Britain's Uther period, when everyone is still recovering from the fact that, Rome has left England and Britain, and all the tribes are sort of warring with each other. There's no high king or anything. But I love that period, and I love the game because you have these almost nobody knights who get given manors and estates, and they have to take care of their estate while also going off on adventures for whoever is sort of currently vying to be their lord. You've got to follow the sort of the rules of chivalry before they're even invented, which is a real annoying thing to have happen. You have to keep your character alive and then start a family so that you have a character to play when your character dies and gets old. And I really just love that sort of cross between the generational play and the fact that each adventure is a year, and then you go into winter and you do your advancement, and you have another year of other stuff. The kind of combining generational play with also this sort of sense that you have control over one little part of this world, and that's about all you can manage. But if you do really well with that, you'll get the benefits down the road. And sometimes those kind of rewards take years to develop. You'll be building a bridge, for example, and then one day Arthur, when he's 22, will show up and, oh, there's a bridge there. I can cross the bridge. This is great. You get 1,000 points of glory for having this, and glory is the way you track, your character experience. And so because Arthur wrote over your bridge and then chose that over every other one, your character gets this benefit. But that could have been a bridge that you built, 10 years prior to this and had no idea that it was going to be important ever. So that sort of unfolding play, that sort of long-term but short-term sort of balance is one of my favorite things about it.
And Charles, your favorite game to GM and what makes that exciting for you to GM?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like I'm pandering here, so I apologize in advance. But I swear to God, this is an honest answer. It's just not a coincidence that I'm in this chat with the people that I'm in this chat with. So I ran Ars Magica for several campaigns for many years. I love that game. I also some of my biggest, longest running campaigns were D20. Sean, you and I, of course, overlapped at WotC working on that. I was later the brand manager for 3.5. And one of my campaigns that I ran for a very long time when I was living in England was a crossover where I used the core of the D20 rules and grafted, but ran an Ars Magica campaign. And I loved that campaign. That was fantastic. I think when asking why I enjoyed those games, I think for Ars Magica, it's basically the setting and the historicity of it rather than the rule system that drew me to it. As a D20, I loved the toolbox that it gave me to do all kinds of interesting things with the rules. Although it did mean investing a lot of work in that, meddling with the rules and with stat blocks and things like that as a GM I could also spend on other things if I so chose. I've never run Trail of Cthulhu, but I did play in a very long campaign run by Jeff Tidball that was absolutely fantastic. It was the best Cthulhu based game experience I've ever had. I currently run Cypher System, which is Monte Cook Games core game system. I have run some Numenera. I ran a Strange campaign. I've run a couple of Cypher System science fiction campaigns that I've really, really dug. And as for why I like that, that's the easiest one to answer. As a GM, it's a game that gives me really a nice, very, very elegant set of tools for running the game that do not impinge at all on my prep time or on where my attention is at the game table. I spend all my prep time thinking about how cool the adventure is going to be and all of the neat characters and places and situations that I'm going to present to my players as the game unfolds. And at the game table, I'm not arbitrating rules. I'm, again, thinking through about what is the most interesting thing to happen here. How can I make this scenario, this encounter really, really fun and exciting and cool in a narrative sense? And the mechanics just take care of themselves from that. So I love that from game system. I love that system.
Great. All right, I'm going to take one last question, and this one is for Kat. I think it's appropriate for Kat. This is from Rick of Ukadoo. A player in their group who wants to become a GM, and they want to support her, offer advice, and help wherever she wants, but they don't want to overwhelm her. Is there anything that you can suggest that would keep her from being thrown into the deep end as a GM?
Okay. I think it's really great that they're keen to support her. I think having a supportive group around you is one of the most important things for a new GM. Having people that you know and that you trust. So I think that's going to be really helpful for her when she comes to run her first game. And I think as well, making sure that she is able to choose, and as Charles said earlier, as the GM, you also have to run a game that's fun for you. And so I think making sure that she chooses a game that will be fun for her to run, and maybe the players might need to make some compromises initially just to kind of give her the opportunity to run something that she's comfortable with at the start. But I think that would be another really useful thing that they could do to help her, is to effectively allow her to choose the system and the setting and the kind of tone of the game. And I think another thing that would be useful would be letting her, we mentioned earlier about maybe doing a side campaign off to ancient Greece, Cam was talking about, maybe letting her run a one-shot or run a one-off game in their regular game group, So she might do a side quest or something like that, just as a one shot, just to kind of test the waters and see how she feels as part of the ongoing game before she actually starts her own game. I think that would also be a useful thing for her. But giving her space to, in a gendered sense, giving her space to talk as well, and listening to her, and making sure that, you know, when she is the GM, speaks, that all of the players are kind of giving her their attention and making sure to listen to her and not talking over her and acknowledging what she's saying. I think that's also a useful thing to do.
That's great advice. Thank you very much. Well, we are at the end of our time limit. I want to thank Kat Tobin of Pelgrane Press, Cam Banks of Atlas Games, Charles of MCG, and our Twitch host, Matt Colville, and Darcy Ross, who is hidden and helping send us questions. Sorry if we didn't get a chance to answer your question, but we have a Facebook group, and there's the new GameMasterMonth.com website where you can also talk to other experienced GMs and other newbies like yourself. So if you have any questions, please go there. One thing we also want to plug right now is that this year is the year that Monte Cook turns 50 and is hitting his 30th year in the game industry. So we're doing a really cool thing called 50-30. You can hear about it on our website. We're just trying to get as many people as possible to run some sort of game that weekend of Saturday the 27th and Sunday the 28th. All the information is on the MCG website. Kat, do you have anything you want to plug since we have an audience for the moment?
I would just say New Game Master Month, Trail of Cthulhu. We have on our website, pelgranepress.com, we have a resource page devoted to first-time GMs running Trail of Cthulhu, as well as a page of other resources that you can download entirely for free. We have adventures, characters, everything you need. As part of New Game Master Month, we've included a link to one of our adventures, and we're going to talk you through how to run that. And that gives you a really good setup as to how to run any trail game. So I just think it's a fantastic initiative, and we're really happy to support it. And we're all kind of around on the Facebook group and on Twitter, and happy to answer any questions that people have.
Awesome. Cool. Cam, got a plug for us?
Yeah, I'm also thrilled that we have the opportunity to have folks try Ananamis out. It's a little different, the way that the game is set up, and the fact, like I said, the objectives and so forth, but there's a lot of resources on our page at atlas-games.com/Ananamis, I think it is. You'll find it. There's links in the chat. The best thing about this new Game Master Month thing is we get to see people trying these games out and sharing that kind of experience with other people on the Facebook, and also at other locations where they can post those experiences. And I'm happy to continue to jump in there and help people out when I see them. We also have other Atlas staff and freelancers, WJ McGuffin, who has been amazingly good at preparing this material. He is also showing up to answer questions too.
And Charles is the head of New Game Master Month. Anything else you'd like to say?
I do want to say, I don't think we've mentioned this for anybody who hasn't been following the program. If you go to New Game Master Month, it is a 8-step program, if you will. We do 8 posts. We're in the middle of it right now. But the truth is, while we made January New Game Master Month, you could do this at any time. And if you haven't started it, you're a couple steps behind, but it will take you between 20 and 45 minutes to do any given step. So you could it is absolutely not too late to jump in. Just go there and click on the Get Started button, and it will take you to the first post, and just go through it, and it'll walk you through. This is a program that is designed to help people who are thinking about GMing or have been thinking about GMing to do it the first weekend in February, to run your actual game, and you'll do it, and you will have fun, and your players will have fun, and you won't be a wannabe GM anymore. You will actually be a GM, and you'll realize, hey, I dig this. I can do it. It's not hard at all. So I just want to call that out. And then I want to thank the panelists. So I've never been on a panel with Cam and with Kat before, but I would do it anytime. You guys are great. If you hadn't picked out from Kat's accent, she's joining us from Ireland. So it's like, 4 o'clock in the morning there or something crazy. Cam, however, is lying to you. His accent, he may tell you one thing, but he's actually in Minneapolis. So it's not that big of a stretch for him.
St. Paul, they're very different.
You're not in St. Paul. You're in like Falcon Heights or something.
No. We're down here deep in St. Paul. It's terrible.
Oh, really?
Okay. So
yeah, they roll the streets up in the middle of the night. No, No, it's the same whole location, yeah. But I mean, it's easy to confuse them when you don't live right here in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, I guess my knowledge of that area is not, my geography is not strong. Anyway, thanks, guys. That's about it.
I have one last
plug in for Monty's birthday. Then
yes, and I have one last request for Kat. Can you say Ars Magica for us in your normal accent?
Well, I would say Ars Magica. I learned it as Ars Magica. I played Ars Magica in the 90s, and that is how I would do it. I am definitely on the side of Ars Magica.
You're not wrong, but no, neither is Sean actually.
And I didn't even say Ars Magica.
I think that's what Sean was looking for.
Yeah,
that was actually that was a chat guest requesting that. That was not me. Yeah, that was Neil Post wanted to know.
Ars.
So thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Welcome to New GM Month. Welcome to GMing, and we hope this will help inspire you to just kick that in that door and run some games. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.